For you guys today. So give it up for John Leave, everybody.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to be clapping at the end, but I didn't plan to do this on a day when everybody would be gone. So some of you are going to go, I wish so-and-so was here to hear this. The church, have a dark family secret. And I want to kind of get it out there, out in the open. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we've got a video to show you. Hey, if somebody could go back and bring the lights down while this video's on, go ahead and play it. She'll have to bring him back up after.
I thought that the day my story came out, my ministry would be over. Turns out that's the day it started. Reputation was everything for me. I set out to build a good reputation and to protect it, which meant that there were parts of my life that I couldn't let anybody see. There were some battles I had to fight alone. I got my first look at hardcore pornography on a seminary-sponsored trip to New York City. My wife was with me. They took us on a tour of Times Square so that we could see firsthand how women are exploited by the sex business. I was shocked by what I saw and disgusted by it. But I was also fascinated. It hit me, hooked me deep. I didn't just like porn. I became obsessed with it. And it eventually took me places I never intended to go. So before I know it, I'm a pastor, married, 3 kids, and I'm picking up my first hooker on my way to lead a candlelight service on Christmas Eve. I only lasted 5 years in the ministry. I was never caught, but I was terrified of losing my reputation. My life was out of control. I'd lost any hope that I could stop what I was doing, so I bailed on the ministry, went into business, succeeded in business. But that's about the only thing I succeeded at. Those were dark years. My life got smaller and smaller. I hated what I was doing. I remember so many times screaming at God as I pulled away from some place I shouldn't have been, banging on the steering wheel, saying, take this away, I don't want to do this anymore. He never answered that prayer. Eventually, I concluded that either he didn't care or he didn't exist. Today, I'm so glad he didn't answer that prayer. I think we're all made for intimacy. But intimacy carries its risks. People can reject us. People can disappear. They can die. Pornography offers this artificial intimacy with no risks. So every day I said hello to the woman who wouldn't laugh at me or who found me attractive, engaging. And every day I gave a piece of myself away. It left me emptier and hungrier every time. And yet I kept coming back. I was oblivious to what it was doing to my wife until one day she caught me. I don't know how long she'd been standing there, but she was crying. And so I apologized and we talked it through. And I was still afraid. A few days later, she found a condom on the floor in the bathroom that I couldn't quite explain. This time, she didn't cry. She sat me down on the edge of our bed and she said, I'm done. I still love you, but I don't like you. I don't trust you. I don't respect you. And I don't believe you can ever change. That's what it took for me to get out of my private world. Living in the truth, walking in the light, no matter how other people might perceive it. I mean, that's freedom. And to know that I don't have to perform to be accepted. I always felt bad that I wasn't a better person. I even created this false self, this Saint Nate that I tried to breathe on its own. I felt bad that Saint Nate could only live at church. Now I know that Jesus never loved Saint Nate because he didn't make Saint Nate. He made me. Jesus loves me, wants a relationship with me. And that's the only real relationship there is. There's a tremendous liberty when you arrive in a place that's safe enough to bring your real self and say the real truth. There were men who did that for me, Christian men. And I found that I could give the same gift to another guy. Sit down over a cup of coffee and just tell him my story. And even if his life is different from mine, and everybody's life is different from mine in the details, something about my story resonated with his. And so many times, by the time we finished, he'd say, well, you know, I've never told anybody this, but you got a taste of freedom too. Because of my addiction, I now understand that only God is the center of things. He's actually used my addiction for good. Because of it, I've been forced to join the human race and surrender to a power greater than myself. God is good. God is love. And if I'll follow the path that he's laid out for me, I can live every day in the warmth of his love, and I can reflect it to others. I don't think I ever really met Jesus until I stepped out of my church persona and became just another desperate, broken man. That's when he really became real to me. This isn't the ministry I planned. But I know it's mine. And my wife knows it too. We're in it together. My wife will tell you today that she's been married to two guys named Nate Larkin. And as hard as those first 20 years were, she'd take him again to get the last 10. I'm Nate Larkin, and I am second.
The I'm Second site, you should check it out. There's just hundreds of videos of people like Nate Larkin and a lot of famous people you've probably heard of. But Nate's story is this secret. It's this family secret that's in the church. And it's in our church. I don't necessarily know who, but I know it is just statistically. And the thing about Nate is, I mean, it takes a lot of courage for a person to come out publicly and talk about kind of the raw things that Nate talked about. But as he said, that's the way you find real freedom. Now, Nate isn't alone. I want to read you just a few statistics. And I'm serious. This was one of the most difficult to edit talks I've ever done. And I'm just going to give you a few salient statistics and stories about porn and porn in the church. 76% of Christian men, now I don't mean people who just say that they believe in God. This is a research that's been done in the church, and it's selected out people who are practicing their faith. 76% of Christian men view porn regularly, which means weekly or monthly. 51% of Christian young adult women view porn at least occasionally. 90% of teen boys and 70% of teen girls have viewed porn at least once. The first use of porn today is 8 to 10 years old. And it's because of smartphones, the advent of smartphones. And 47% of kids' first contact with porn is when they're doing homework and they're researching on the internet. Hackers link to regular sites, and when people are searching them, they don't even have to misspell it. Hackers are constantly working at getting a foothold in sites, and then they redirect traffic to porn sites. One porn site alone, I'm just going to give you some statistics about one porn site, all right? One porn site, I'm not going to say the name of it, among the companies who use the largest amount of bandwidth in the world, there's Google, there's Netflix, and then there's this porn site. I just want you to stop and think about that. Second, that porn site has more daily hits than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. That one website. In 2019, users logged onto that website and watched 4.6 billion hours of porn. One website. There are millions of porn websites. That's the biggest. Nate is not alone. And what I want to do today is, I just want to take a couple of minutes and explain the cost of porn and the cause of porn and the cure for porn. All right? The cost of porn, the cause of porn, and the cure of porn. So, Nate described it. And I'm going to pick up on something I said a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about because we're in a series on family. And this is the family secret, okay? When we did the talk on the prodigal and his father, we talked about how surprising the father was. And one of the things that the story of the prodigal, or the parable of the prodigal son, says is that it's the same thing that Nate just testified to in his video on I Am Second, is three things that he went through, the prodigal went through, Nate went through, and we all go through. That this is the cost of porn. Nate said it. And I've talked to enough men, and I experienced it myself when I was a younger man, that porn, there's lots of costs to porn, but here's three. It leaves you empty. It leaves you out of control, and it leaves you alone. And those three things, it feels really good, but it leaves you empty. It feels really good, but it leaves you losing control of your life. And it feels really good, but it leaves you alone. Those are the three outcomes among many of porn. So there's a cycle of addiction or dependency even, because not everybody that uses porn is addicted, but we quickly become dependent upon it because there's a pleasure center in everyone's brain. And when you do something that's pleasurable, your brain registers that and you want to experience it again. I know this is a secret, but that's why we want to eat ice cream. It's pleasurable. But believe it or not, a porn is way more potent in terms of the release of chemicals in the pleasure center of your brain. It's so powerful that you become dependent on it, and then some people become addicted. And there's there's lots of arguments out there about how many people are sexually addicted, but millions of people are. Nobody really knows. But anybody who has any sense of, what the human brain is capable of knows that porn is a powerful thing. Because it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Then there's a lot of people who are finding themselves caught up in its grip. Here's the cycle of addiction. There's a trigger, some stress in someone's life, and I think Nate might have kind of touched on this, but if you ever hear testimonies about the use of porn, there's a trigger, some kind of stress, some discomfort, some pain, something in your life. And then there's a longing that surfaces. There's a hunger, a deep longing. And then there's a ritual or an acting out in some way. And we're talking about the use of porn today. You could say eating. Eating, people have eating disorders, and they follow the same pattern. Trigger, longing, ritual, and then emptiness. Because after you use it, you find yourself, it satisfies briefly, and then you feel worse, because not only do you still feel empty, but you feel guilt and shame on top of it because you're giving into something. And every time you do that, it reinforces the use of porn. You go, how could it? I mean, you feel so bad. It doesn't matter. The pleasure center of your brain gets such a jolt when you use porn that you're going to go back to it. At some point, you'll go back to it. And I want to read, some of you have heard of Billie Eilish. She's a really, really talented musician. And she was on the Howard Stern show. And I took some quotes. Don't worry, I don't watch the Howard Stern show that often. Gosh, nobody even got that. Okay. I guess that was awkward laughing. They're turning to each other. Do you think John watches the Howard Stern show? Do you think he watches it very often? Let's talk about this over lunch. Billie Eilish spoke candidly about her addiction to watching porn and the way it negatively affected her, saying she now feels incredibly devastated that I was exposed to so much porn. She shared her thoughts on the Howard Stern show, and she said that in her estimation, porn destroyed her brain. As a woman, I think porn is a disgrace. I used to watch a lot of porn, to be honest. I started watching it when I was like 11. I think it really destroyed my brain, and I feel incredibly devastated that I was exposed to so much porn. She added that watching it initially helped her feel cool and like she was one of the guys. Ultimately, however, she admits it led to her suffering nightmares because some of the content she watched was so violent and abusive. It also shaped the way she saw sex and dating and herself in general. The first few times, I had sex, I was not saying no to things that were not good. It was because I thought, that's what I'm supposed to be attracted to. I'm so angry that porn is so loved, and I'm so angry at myself for thinking it was okay. Women's bodies don't look like that. We don't come like that. Now, we could get into how degrading porn is to women, but One of the things that porn does is it changes the way you look at people. If you're a woman, it changes the way you look at men. It also changes the way you look at yourself. And so many women are devastated who look at porn, and a lot of women look at porn, believe it or not. Less than men, but millions of women look at porn, and they look at these physically enhanced women on these porn videos, and they compare themselves, because this is what we do as human beings. We compare ourselves. And they get filled with this loathing, and they walk around with that because it's so powerful. It brands itself into your brain, and you walk around just thinking, I'm just not enough. I'll never be enough. I'll never be like this. I'll never be like that. And it just erodes women's confidence. And they can't appreciate the beauty, the innate beauty that every woman carries as image bearers of God. And porn just attacks that. It just burns it down and ruins it. And I'm going to read another famous musician's story in a moment, but let me tell you about, so porn feels good, but it leaves us empty. Porn feels good, but it leads to a loss of control. I mentioned earlier that porn leads to desensitization. And one of the things that we become desensitized to is extramarital and premarital sex. That we just begin to accept it as like, okay, it's not that bad. And there might be a time in life where we realize, wow, sex is this really sacred, beautiful thing, and it shouldn't just be treated like, a product or a service. And one of the things porn has done is it's sexualized everything. I mean, marketers know we can make money if we sell our product or our service with sex. It is the go-to way of marketing. Why? Do the people on the marketing boardrooms just like to see beautiful, attractive people, without much clothes on associated with their product? No, it has nothing to do with that. They want to sell their product, and they know sex gets everyone's attention. Your brain can pick up a sexual image quicker than it can pick up anything else that you see. Research shows that, and that you're attracted to it before you'll be attracted to anything else, even very familiar things in your life. One of the things that research has shown, and this has been studied by all kinds of people for decades, researchers have found that porn leads to the idea that any kind of denial of a sexual desire is a harmful repression. Now, you just have to think about that for a minute. If you can't make the connection, I'm going to take you there in just a second about how dangerous that is. One of the things that porn use does, which is one of the saddest things, is it leads viewers to accept male dominance and female subservience. The research shows this over and over and over and over. That's a destructive thing. Back in 2001, one state was researching crime in their state. This is 2001. This is 21 years ago. Over 50% of all the sex offenders in the state were adolescents. In other words, they were under 18. In a whole state. Many of the felony sexual assaults of which these adolescents were charged and convicted were being committed by children as young as 8 years old who were imitating what they had seen in porn. Many of them hadn't been abused themselves. They just had seen porn, and kids are curious. It's a natural thing. Kids are curious about sex. There is nothing wrong with that. Parents should never freak out that their kids discover their bodies and want to know more about it. They want to know more about little boys' bodies and little girls' bodies. It's not evil. It's a stage of development. But you put porn into that, online porn, and suddenly it takes children to places that they're not in any way prepared to go. No one should ever go, in fact. Porn feels good, but it leaves us alone. I don't know if you knew this, but 56% of divorce cases involve obsessive online porn use by one partner or more. So it contributes. It's not the cause, but it's a strong contributor to the breakup of marriages. It leads, this is the craziest, it should be a scary statistic. But before there was the prevalence of online porn had become so widespread, of men under 40, only about 5% of them struggled with erectile dysfunction, impotence. Now, with the onset of online porn, it's close to 35% of men cannot have an erection because they've looked at so much online porn, it has broken something inside them. I'll read this shocking quote. John Mayer. You guys ever heard of John Mayer? John Mayer, the musician, right? He was interviewed a few years back in Playboy magazine. And in the interview, he comes out with this interesting confession. He admitted that he preferred fantasy and masturbation to sex with a woman. So the Playboy interviewers said, "So masturbation for you is as good as sex?" "Absolutely, because during sex, I'm just going to a film strip in my head. I'm still masturbating. That's what you do when you're 30, 31, 32. This is my problem now. Rather than meet somebody new, I would rather go home and replay the amazing experiences I've already had." Wow. I mean, it's shocking that he admitted it. He talked about it. I'm sorry, this frank conversation, but this is the world we live in now. And this is in the church. This is the part of our lives, right? We just have to face this. This is something we got to discuss, and that we should be talking about really openly. We shouldn't, say the S word when we're talking about sex. All of our kids should know the accurate, anatomical names for their body parts. Not shoo-shoo or pee-pee or whatever it is that we say, because we feel shame. Do you understand? That's just shame that we've attached to something that's normal and beautiful and good. And we have to stop that. We do. I mean, you can't read the Bible and not deal with graphic sexual discussions and descriptions. And they're not pornographic or prurient or, corrupting. They're just saying this is a part of the world we live in. It's part of our lives. It's God's design. So, porn use is caused. It's real simple. Here's what causes porn use. The Bible tells us we're made for intimacy. We're made for intimacy with God and with others. You go back to the first three chapters, Genesis 1, 2, and 3. It says that God made humanity, and then he walked in the garden and talk with him face to face. And then they had intimacy with him that was deeply fulfilling. And they were made for that. And one of the things one of the things I don't want to do in this talk is, I want to shift away from it, is I don't want to just shock you in talking about porn use, because it's a shadow. It is going to be gone one day. I want to focus you on the reality, the substance. Intimacy with God is what we were made for. It's what we long for. Whether we know it or not, it's just this beautiful thing that God says is for us, right? And but if we choose not to pursue intimacy with Him, we will pursue some substitute of intimacy with Him and with each other, because it also said that Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. They had this intimacy. They were known utterly and completely by each other. And then as soon as they sinned, it says they started hiding. And all this breakdown just cascaded through history. Jeremiah 2 says this, where Jeremiah the prophet was challenging the nation of Israel at this time. And here's what he said. Now, this is a perfect description of porn use. Be appalled at this, O heavens, and shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns or wells, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. This is the essence of what porn is. We go, God, I don't want to pursue intimacy with you for which I'm created, and in which my deepest longings are overwhelmingly satisfied. I'm going to foolishly pursue, instead of you, something that may even be good. And I'm not saying porn use is good, but sex is good. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's a gift of God. But if we pursue that instead of God, what Jeremiah said was, you are digging a well or a cistern, which they would use to catch water in a dry climate. They conserve water every way they can. So they create these cisterns. And when it would rain, they would funnel water into those, and that would take them through dry spells. But what he said is, porn is like one of those cisterns that's broken, that as soon as the water goes in it, the water empties out. That's what we experience when we look at porn. And when we do it over and over and over, we just reinforce that. Now, this false intimacy is a false kind of worship. Because worship is meant to be, and it's not just what we do on Sunday, but it's meant to be this place where we experience intimacy with God, where we self-disclose, where we become known for who we really are. No more, as we used to say, what was that? I'm sorry, the phrase just popped out of my head. Senior moment here. Chapel faces or church faces, you know? I used to stand out the front door and say hello to everybody, and sometimes people aren't really aware of how other people can be perceptive. They're getting out of their car, and you can see a couple just going at it. You know, someone's pulling the kid along like that, like the kid's right, and they're like this, and they're like this with each other, you know, and they look up, and I'm smiling at them like this, and they go immediately. How you doing, John? It's so good to be here with you, right? And I never called anybody out, right? But that's the way we are. We put on this face, right? We want the chaos of our lives to just be hidden because we don't know what people will think of us if they knew. But what Nate said was, when I put it out there and became honest appropriately, that's when I started living. And we've talked about this tons, about how honesty is this pathway to a rich life. The richest life possible is a life that's on the road of honesty. But that is one freaking hard road to walk on. It is. I won't ask for a show of hands. If you've tried to walk on it, it's like the proverbial walking on hot coals game. It is hard to walk on the road of honesty. It is. And I don't just mean honesty like, hey, this is who I am. Just take it or leave it, buddy. You know, because I'm selfish and ornery, and I'm being honest about it. No, that's not it. I mean, that's a little, you're close. But you're just, justifying your selfish behavior. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for you to be the real you without the attitude. Okay? That's what you saw with Nate. That's what I've seen with many of you over the years. And that gets you where hiding will never take you. Never. Never. And I understand, I make fun. Nobody wants... I just want to tell you something, just in case you get the wrong message from what I said. If you're fighting in the parking lot, I really don't want you to come in here and keep fighting, in the Sunday school room or right here, right? No throwing Bibles at each other, but, just be civilized. But what I do want you to do is, in a moment of honesty, turn to one of your friends who's sitting next to you and saying, we're in the middle of a pretty funky argument. I'm sorry we look pretty unhappy. That's just where we're at right now. Totally cool. Do that whenever you want, right? Don't hide it. Don't hide it. John Wimber used to say that fighting on the way to church was like normal. Everybody does it. I won't ask for a show of hands. This is the pastor's dirty little secret. Kathy and I learned that years ago, Rick. Way before Rick figured it out. We don't tell anybody. We just figure out that's how we can come to church without wanting to kill someone, is we ride in separate cars. But if you have too many kids, that just creates a fight that never ends. So anyway, the deepest longing that we try to meet with porn can only be met by Jesus. That's it. That's it. That's the only place. And the cure for porn use is real straightforward. I'm just going to read this to you. I'm just going to recite the story to you. But in Judges chapter 5, how many of you ever heard of the man named Gideon? Okay. Pretty well-known character. God called Gideon to become this deliverer of Israel during a time where they were just really getting their butts kicked. That the nations around them were just, every time Israel's crops would come to harvest, the nations would come in and just take them. They took all their weapons. They just bullied Israel. Now, Israel was being unfaithful to their covenant with God, and that's why this was happening. And so God raised up different leaders in the book of Judges, and one of them was Gideon. And what he said was, I'm going to use you to rescue Israel. But the very first thing, after kind of working that out with Gideon, and Gideon wasn't sure he could do it, but God really gave him a sense of confidence, and he kind of wavered along the way. You know the story of the fleeces and all that. The first thing that God told him to do was this curious little project. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to go to your dad's house, and in the backyard there is an altar to Baal, and there's an Asherah pole. And I want you to break down the altar to Baal, and I want you to take the Asherah pole, cut it down, and cut it up, because it's made out of wood, and take your dad's second bull, which is like the number 2 bull, because he's already had the first bull killed, and offer that bull as a sacrifice. Build an altar to the Lord and offer appropriate sacrifice. So what he was saying was, deliverance in Israel is going to start by turning from the worship of Baal. and turning to the worship of the Lord. So you had to tear down the altar of Baal, and you had to build an altar to the Lord. And that's the way forward in dealing with this. Now, if you read the story, which I should do, but we're getting close to time to wind up. When Gideon carries out this assignment, number one, it says he does it at night because he's nervous. And as soon as he does it, so he breaks down the altar of Baal, cuts down the Asherah pole, builds an altar to the Lord, and he takes 10 of his servants with him because it's a big job. And the next morning, when everybody gets up and sees the altar of Baal torn down and the Asherah pole gone, it says, who did this? And they start asking questions and investigate, and they find out that Gideon did it, and they go, we're going to kill him. Everybody was upset. And there's lots of reasons why, but I want to tell you something. What Baal and Asherah represent was sexualized worship. And it's just a picture of what we're talking about is sex is about intimacy. And worship is intimacy with God. Perverted worship, which was what Baal worship and Asherah worship were, was where you create these idols, and these idols were sexualized. Typically, Baal and Asherah, Baal would be a symbol of a penis. You can look this up in historical records and see the same thing with Asherah. They were sexualized idols. And the way you worshiped Baal, who was one of the gods of fertility, was you had sex with the priests and the priestesses, and then the worshipers had sex. Okay, this is R-rated stuff. Maybe it's more than that. But I want you to understand something. There are dark powers that are over that kind of worship. There are dark powers that are over porn use. When we get involved in porn use, we invite these dark powers to have their way in our lives. There is a cost to us and everyone around us that's close to us. And the reaction that you saw from all the other people is the same reaction that you will experience from the people around you when you say, I don't look at porn anymore. People will think you're crazy. People will call you some kind of repressed Puritan. They will mock you. They will do all kinds of things. You probably won't get lynched, but you won't be considered, a thoughtful, modern person anymore. And that they would look at you and go, how could you ever be happy without, expressing whatever desire just bubbles up inside you, whatever sexual desire you have. If you repress it, that's harmful. It's not at all. God knows He designed us. He made us. And so He said two things, and this is what I want to invite you into. We're going to take the Lord's Supper. And you guys in the worship team, if you could come back up.